At 5 a.m. on June 3, 2026, the first Ukrainian drone crossed the Gulf of Finland. Not a small commercial quadcopter, a long-range, purpose-built strike aircraft. Range, over 1,000 kilometers. Target, the St. Petersburg Oil Terminal, one of Russia's largest liquid cargo transshipment facilities on the Baltic Sea, with an annual capacity of 10 to 12.5 million tons. At 5:03 a.m., the drone struck. The explosion was not subtle. A massive fireball rose over the terminal. Black smoke began to billow across the northern horizon. Within minutes, at least 5 storage reservoirs were destroyed. Others were breached. At 5:11 a.m., a second wave of drones approached Kronstadt, the island naval base just west of St. Petersburg, home to the Russian Navy's Baltic Fleet. The target? The corvette Boikiy, sitting motionless in drydock. The drone bored in against negligible defensive fire. A second drone followed, diving into the now burning superstructure. By 6 a.m., the fires were still burning. By 9 a.m., satellite imagery confirmed catastrophic damage. By 12 p.m., the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, Putin's personal Davos, was scheduled to open, with thousands of dignitaries from over 130 countries walking to the venue with black smoke visible on the horizon behind them. And Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, was in the city, his home city, his showcase event, his flagship conference designed to prove that Russia is a world power on equal footing with the United States and China. Here's what the official Russian narrative wanted you to believe. The attacks were insignificant. Air defenses shot down 59 drones. Damage was minimal. The forum went ahead as planned. Everyone was safe. That is the sentence that stopped me. Not because it's entirely false, but because of what it chooses not to say. Before I show you exactly what Ukraine just did to Putin's home city, hit subscribe. This is War Conflict. I post forensic analysis of every major escalation, and this is the one that proves no Russian city is safe, not even the one Putin calls home. Let me start with what is confirmed and what is not, because transparency matters. On June 3, 2026, Ukrainian long-range drones struck the St. Petersburg Oil Terminal, causing a massive fire. Satellite imagery from Planet Labs and Vanter confirmed the damage. At least 5 reservoirs destroyed, large smoke plume visible for kilometers. A separate Ukrainian drone strike hit the Kronstadt naval base, home of Russia's Baltic Fleet. The corvette Boikiy, in dry dock for repairs, was struck and set on fire. Dynamic video of the attack was published by Ukraine's Drone Forces Command. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed his country's drones carried out both strikes. "I believe these are fair strikes," he told reporters. "It's just a matter of time before we can scale up the intensity of our responses." The St. Petersburg International Economic Forum, SPIEF, a flagship Kremlin event sometimes called Russia's Davos, was scheduled to open later that same morning. Thousands of guests from over 130 countries attended. Vladimir Putin was in St. Petersburg for the forum. He spoke on Friday, June 5th, addressing the assembled dignitaries. Russian authorities reported that 59 drones were shot down over the Leningrad region overnight. Alexander Beglov, St. Petersburg's governor, said infrastructure objects were hit in 3 districts, and several people were injured, with no fatalities. St. Petersburg's Pulkovo airport temporarily suspended flights. Mobile internet was disrupted. Russian state media like TASS, RIA Novosti, and RT largely ignored the strike. Coverage of the forum opening made no mention of the black smoke visible in the background. The full extent of damage to the Boikiy corvette and the oil terminal continues to be assessed. Russian claims that the attacks caused only insignificant damage are contradicted by satellite imagery showing large fires and multiple destroyed reservoirs. The strategic implications, the humiliation, the psychological impact, the message sent to every Russian official, those are based on open-source interpretation of confirmed events. Here's what you need to understand before we go further. Ukraine didn't just hit an oil terminal. They hit Putin's home city, on the day of his flagship conference, while he was there. And they did it with drones that flew over 1,000 kilometers through Russian airspace that was supposed to be protected by the most advanced air defense systems in the world. Let me walk you through what Ukraine actually accomplished in the early morning hours of June 3, 2026. First attack, the St. Petersburg Oil Terminal. The terminal is one of Russia's largest liquid cargo transshipment facilities on the Baltic Sea, with an annual capacity of approximately 10 to 12.5 million tons. It is critical infrastructure. Fuel from this terminal supplies military logistics, naval operations, and the civilian economy of Russia's second-largest city. Ukrainian drones struck the facility around dawn. Eyewitnesses recorded at least 5 hits and fiery explosions. The Ukrainian investigative group SPIEF published Planet Labs satellite imagery showing a large-scale fire at the terminal site. Imagery released by the U.S. spatial intelligence firm Vantor showed a massive smoke plume towering over the terminal. At least 5 reservoirs were destroyed. Others were probably breached. Second attack, the Kronstadt naval base. Kronstadt is an island just west of St. Petersburg. It is the main outpost of the Russian Navy's Baltic Fleet, home to major shipbuilding and repair facilities. Ukrainian military news feeds reported successful hits against a Kronstadt-based warship. By Wednesday evening, Ukraine's Drone Forces Command published dynamic video documenting the attack. The footage showed a kamikaze drone boring in on the Russian Navy corvette Boikiy, motionless in drydock, against negligible defensive fire. A second drone followed, diving into the now-burning superstructure. The black smoke plume from Boikiy's fire was visible some 25 kilometers away in St. Petersburg City, and to any attendees of the SPIEF conference looking in the naval port's direction. These were not symbolic strikes. These were surgical, well-planned, coordinated attacks on strategic military and economic infrastructure. And they happened while Russian authorities were publicly declaring that security preparations for the forum were fully complete and at the highest level, with all new security challenges fully taken into account. Here's the detail that almost nobody has fully appreciated. The timing of these strikes was not random. The St. Petersburg International Economic Forum is the Kremlin's premier event for attracting foreign investment and showcasing Russia's global standing. Approximately 20,000 participants from over 130 countries attended. Among the highest-profile attendees, Uzbekistan's president, Tanzania's president, China's vice president, and Saudi Arabia's energy minister. This is Russia's Davos, Putin's personal showcase, and Ukrainian drones struck the city hours before it opened. President Volodymyr Zelensky was direct about the message. "I believe these are fair strikes," he said. "Just a day ago, there was a massive attack. We responded accordingly." The Ukrainian president also posted on social media that the Ukrainian plan of long-range sanctions is being implemented exactly as it is needed to bring peace closer. A euphemism for long-distance strikes on Russia. Consider the psychological impact. Dignitaries from 130 countries walked to the opening ceremony with black smoke visible on the northern horizon behind the conference hall. Russian state-controlled media described the forum as a celebration of Russia's status as a world power, but the smoke told a different story. Ukrainian presidential advisor Mikhailo Podolyak said on X, formerly Twitter, "SPIEF has started, and Russia's invulnerability continues to evaporate. Drones are the new reality of war. Drones are the new reality of the economy." Yevhen Karas, commander of Ukraine's 413th Regiment of Unmanned Systems Forces, gave a remarkable assessment of the operation. "We fly in Russia like it's our own territory. Almost no resistance, not hard to reach a target," he told the BBC. Read that again. A Ukrainian commander said his drones fly over Russian territory like it's our own territory. The country that prides itself on its air defense capabilities, that has invested billions in the S-400 system, cannot stop Ukrainian drones from reaching its second-largest city. And Putin was there when it happened. The governor of the Leningrad region claimed air defenses shot down 59 drones overnight. But the drones that got through, the ones that hit the oil terminal and the naval base, those were not stopped. The Boikiy is burning, the fuel terminal is burning, and the smoke was visible to everyone attending Putin's conference. Robert Brovdy, the commander of Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, signed off on the operation with a direct message to Russian readers. There is more to come. Here is the number that I keep coming back to. The distance from Ukrainian-controlled territory to St. Petersburg is approximately 1,000 to 1,290 kilometers, depending on the launch point. That is not a short-range drone flight. That is a deep penetration into Russian airspace. Through layers of air defense, past S-400 batteries, past fighter patrols, past electronic warfare systems, and the drones got through. The cost of each long-range drone is estimated at a fraction of what Russia spends on a single S-400 interceptor missile. The ratio is not 1-to-1, it is 1-to-10, 1-to-20. Ukraine spends relatively little. Russia spends enormous sums to defend. And still, the drones hit their targets. But the numbers that matter more are the ones you cannot calculate in dollars. The St. Petersburg International Economic Forum was supposed to showcase Russian power. Instead, it showcased Russian vulnerability. Dignitaries from 130 countries witnessed black smoke on the horizon. They heard the explosions. They saw the video circulating on social media of Ukrainian drones flying over Russian cities. What message does that send to potential investors? What message does that send to allies? What message does that send to the Russian people? Here is a detail that Russian state media will never report. A female Russian social media user, identified as Aline.alien_beauty, wrote after watching the attack, "As a matter of fact, I caught myself thinking today how proper it is for Ukrainians to defend oneself, not targeting apartments and not peaceful civilians." Even Russians are beginning to question the official narrative. Even Russians are acknowledging that the strikes were justified. And the silence from Russian state media is deafening. TASS, RIA Novosti, and RT reported in detail on the opening ceremony, the dignitaries attending, and even the excellent weather visitors would enjoy. But for those Kremlin-loyal outlets, the refinery strike and its aftermath were not news and were not reported. They didn't mention the smoke. They didn't mention the burning corvette. They didn't mention that Ukraine just struck Putin's home city while he was in it. That silence is not a cover-up. That silence is the sound of a government that has no explanation and no solution. The story did not end on June 3rd. Just days later, on June 6th, Ukraine launched an even larger wave of drones targeting St. Petersburg. This time, Russian authorities called it unprecedented. More than 140 drones were shot down over the surrounding Leningrad region, Governor Alexander Drozdenko said. St. Petersburg's governor, Alexander Beglov, urged residents to remain indoors for the first time since the war began more than 4 years ago. An entire city, Russia's second-largest city, home to over 5 million people, was told to stay inside, not because of an advancing army, because of drones. Zelensky said Ukrainian drones covered a distance of 1,000 kilometers to hit the enemy Navy's arsenals and a base in Kronstadt. An oil depot 500 kilometers away in the southern Krasnodar region was also hit, and the commander of one of the Ukrainian units involved told the BBC something that should terrify every Russian military planner. "We fly in Russia like it's our own territory. Almost no resistance, not hard to reach a target." That is the most devastating quote to come out of this entire operation. A Ukrainian commander is saying that Russian airspace is not defended, that their drones fly through with near impunity, that the mighty S-400, the billion-dollar air defense network, is not stopping them, and the evidence is on satellite imagery. The Boikiy is still burning, the fuel terminal is damaged, and the people of St. Petersburg are being told to stay indoors. This is not how a superpower is supposed to respond to drone attacks. This is how a country on the defensive responds. This is how a country that cannot protect its own airspace responds. Putin had boasted that Russia's air defenses were the best in the world, that no enemy could penetrate Russian skies, that the S-400 would stop any threat. Ukrainian drones just proved otherwise, on June 3rd, and again on June 6th, and again whenever Ukraine decides to launch the next wave, because, as Brovdi said, there is more to come. Here is the trap that Putin now finds himself in, and I need you to sit with this because it explains everything. Russia has two options. Neither is good. Option 1, continue as before. Keep relying on air defense. Keep shooting down drones where they can. Keep claiming success. Keep hoping the Ukrainian drone supply runs out. The problem with this approach is that Ukraine is not running out of drones. They are producing more, and each drone is cheap, and each drone that gets through is another humiliation. Another burning fuel depot, another burning warship, another city told to shelter indoors. Option 2, launch retaliatory strikes against Ukrainian decision-making centers. Escalate the war. Target Ukrainian cities with even greater intensity. The problem with this approach is that Russia is already doing that. On Monday, June 1st, Russia launched a massive missile and drone attack on Ukrainian cities, killing 23 civilians, including 7 in Kyiv and 16 in Dnipro. And Ukraine responded by striking St. Petersburg. Escalation is not deterring Ukraine, it is provoking them. And every time Russia escalates, Ukraine finds a new way to strike back. The trap is symmetrical. Russia cannot stop the drones, and Ukraine cannot stop Russian missiles. So both sides bleed, both sides escalate, both sides claim victory while the smoke rises over their cities. But here is what makes this different from previous escalations. Ukraine is now hitting Russian territory at will. Not the border regions, not occupied territories, St. Petersburg, Russia's second city, Putin's home city. The psychological damage of that cannot be overstated. If St. Petersburg is not safe, no Russian city is safe. If the Baltic Fleet's home port can be struck, no naval base is safe. If Putin's own showcase event can be overshadowed by black smoke and burning fuel, no Kremlin narrative is safe. The Russian people are beginning to see the war not as a distant conflict in Ukraine, but as something that affects their daily lives. Fuel shortages, airport closures, shelter-in-place orders, drones buzzing overhead. That is not a winning strategy for the Kremlin. That is a losing strategy. Because wars become unpopular when they come home. and Ukrainian drones have just brought the war home to Russia's second-largest city. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, visiting Kiev on the same day as the first St. Petersburg strike, warned that Russia remains a significant threat to European security. But the events of June 3rd and June 6th suggest that Russia's ability to project power may be more limited than it appears. If Russia cannot defend its own cities, how can it defend its borders? If Russia cannot protect its own naval bases, how can it threaten NATO? The trap is that every day this war continues, Russia looks weaker, and every Ukrainian drone that reaches Russian territory accelerates that perception. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio acknowledged the shift. Ukraine has become increasingly effective at conducting long-range strikes deep into Russia, he told a congressional committee. He called it one of the things that reminds us of why it's important to try to bring this war to an end. But ending the war is not simple. Putin wants to keep fighting. Zelensky has called for direct talks, but Putin refused, saying he would only end the war when Russia's goals had been met. So, the war continues, and the drones continue to fly, and the smoke continues to rise over Russian cities that were once considered safe. Zelensky put it directly, "It is only a matter of time when we will be able to increase the scale of our own mass strikes." Here is what makes this harder to talk about than it should be. Russian state media cannot acknowledge the success of Ukrainian strikes without admitting that Russia's air defense network has failed. So they pretend the strikes didn't happen. They focus on the forum. They focus on the dignitaries. They focus on the weather. But the people of St. Petersburg saw the smoke. The forum attendees saw the smoke. The satellite imagery captured the smoke. And the videos circulating on social media documented the drones. The silence from Moscow is not a cover-up. The silence is a choice between bad options. Admit failure and lose face, or pretend nothing happened and lose credibility. Neither option restores the perception of Russian invincibility that Putin has spent years cultivating. The attack on St. Petersburg on June 3, 2026, will be studied in military academies for decades. Not because of the tonnage of explosives delivered, because of what it proved. It proved that Ukrainian drones can reach any Russian city. It proved that Russian air defense has gaps that can be exploited. It proved that Putin's flagship events can be humiliated. And it proved that the war is no longer somewhere else. It is now in Putin's home city. Ukrainian drones did not win the war on June 3rd, but they may have won something equally important, the battle for perception. The battle that says Russia is not as powerful as it claims, that Russian cities are not as safe as Russians believed, that the Kremlin cannot protect its own. The smoke over St. Petersburg was visible to everyone, and everyone saw it. Here is my question for you in the comments. Was the timing of the St. Petersburg strike, during Putin's flagship economic forum, a brilliant piece of psychological warfare? Or did Ukraine risk an unnecessary escalation that could backfire? I read every comment. The best ones I'll address in a follow-up. All sources are linked in the description. RTE, BBC, CBC, The New York Times, AP News, and ABC News confirm the strike details, the forum timing, and the strategic implications. Satellite imagery analysis from Planet Labs, Vanter, and the Kiev Post confirms the damage. If you made it this far, you understand that the next war won't be won by the side with the best tanks. It will be won by the side that can fly 1,000 kilometers into enemy territory and turn Putin's showcase event into a smoking ruin. This is war conflict. I'll see you in the next one.